Hello and welcome back to another online lesson. Today we'll be looking at life on the home front. If you remember from last lesson or last lecture, the United States had just gotten involved with World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, we declared war in Japan, and then they went ahead and declared war on us. Germany came to their aid and declared war on them. What we're going to be looking at today is the life on the home front for the United States citizens. And for these notes, it looks a little bit different. For example, I'm going to read the directions for you. For this online lesson, you will be creating your own notes in whatever way you would like. You can create a concept map, outline, or just copy the information as is. You will be expected to include the following in your notes. So I'm highlighting most important what you need to have. So for each one of these Roman numerals, you need to have each individual piece of information explained. First, women in factories, looking at Rosie the Riveters. Second, the purpose of victory gardens and scrap drives. Third, the OPA, the OES, and the WLB. So again, a lot of letters thrown in there. Fourth, the purpose of rationing in war bonds. Fifth, Japanese internment. We're going to spend some time in class talking about Korematsu versus the U.S., but I really want you to focus on, for this lesson, the concept, the decision, and the significance of that decision. So let's get started. Again, World War II was another one of these total wars because everyone was involved. It wasn't just the soldiers, it was the people on the home front. For example, women, nicknamed Rosie the Riveters, they take over men's factory jobs and they are making all sorts of war supplies, weapons, vehicles, ammunition, as factories begin to reopen. We're starting to really come out of World War II at this point. Eventually, 2.5 million women were working in these factories. Something that citizens were required to take part in were victory gardens and scrap drives. Now, Americans planted victory gardens to produce more food for the war effort. Food to be sent overseas, food to be sent to our troops, other troops, and food to supply people here at home. These gardens were set up in yards. They were set up in any basically open space of land that was available. They also had scrap drives, and scrap drives were where raw materials that were vital to the war effort were collected and melted down and to be used in the factories. So here are the two really big things that affected a lot of people that they were able to participate in. Victory gardens, so your victory garden counts now more than ever, and save scrap for victory. And these types of posters right here, along with the one up here, these are types of propaganda, getting people to contribute to this war effort. So, we've just covered women in the factories, Rosie the Riveter, purpose of victory gardens. Let's look at the OPA, OES, and WLB. So all these acronyms have to do with companies or businesses, legislation that had to do with controlling wages and prices. So first, looking at the OPA. This was the Office of Price Administration, and this regulated all prices not controlled by the OES. Well, what was the OES? This was the Office of Economic Stabilization, which regulated wages and the price of farm products. So the OES, think farm products. That's what it regulated. And the OPA, Office of Price Administration, they regulated everything else. So again, we're thinking of this, we're thinking of Office of Economic Stabilization, farms. So let's see. Think farm. And then this is everything else. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. If not, we can talk more about it in class. And finally, the WLB. This was the War Labor Board. And the War Labor Board worked to prevent strikes that would endanger the war effort. So it worked to keep strikes or workers from going on strike, because a strike would completely slow down a factory production. So in turn, it would slow down the amount of weapons that were getting to our troops, and we did not want to lose this war. Now let's look at rationing. Again, just like in World War I, there was much rationing. This was limiting the availability of many products to make sure there was enough available for military use. Again, a lot of the stuff they rationed or saved was sent to the soldiers overseas. Every month, each household would receive a book of ration coupons, and that would be your limit. The blue coupons, so we'll get a little blue here. So the blue coupons, controlled processed foods. And the red coupons, so let me get a little bit of red in here. Red coupons. Controlled meats, fats, and oils. So that really had to do with rationing food. And as we saw with World War I, World War II also promoted people to buy or wanted to make people buy war bonds. And they used propaganda to get people to buy war bonds. Again, when Americans bought these war bonds, they were loaning money to the government, and they were expected to get that back in full one day down the line after the war's over. So, exchange, the government promised that bonds could be cashed in at some future date for the purchase price plus interest. So if you're looking at a $25 bond and you pay $25 for it, it accumulates interest. When you turn it in, you could get upwards of $50 for it if you kept it long enough. So those are really what was going on in the home front. Now, just to quickly refresh, we talked about women in the factories, purpose of victory gardens and scrap drives, the OPA, OES, and WLB, purpose of rationing and war bonds. Now we're going to look at Japanese internment. And this was something that happened in the United States that is kind of seen as a black eye. A lot of people are ashamed that it happened. So here's what Japanese internment is. During World War II, the government believed without proof, and that's key, you might want to highlight that, star it, circle it, make sure you have that in there, without proof that the Japanese Americans were plotting to attack the nation. Under FDR's Executive Order 9066, all Japanese Americans were placed in internment camps. Now, do not get these confused with concentration camps. They were not the same. However, all Japanese Americans were relocated and put into camps. And this spawns the Korematsu versus the United States government Supreme Court case. So here's Korematsu right here. And here is one of the flyers that say instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry. You must relocate or we'll come and get you and move you. So the concept, this was really what the case was about. Is national security more important than individual constitutional rights? So it's the U.S. government taking on the Constitution. Is what they're doing right? Fred Korematsu, again, who's right up here, argued that the internment of he and other Japanese Americans was against their constitutional rights. After months of deliberation, the Supreme Court came down with this decision. It ruled that the safety of the nation was more important than the constitutional rights of individuals. So it's basically saying that it's okay in times of war for the government to relocate people. Times of conflict, the government to listen to phone calls. As it was going on after the Pearl Harbor attack, they began listening to phone calls of suspected terrorists. Again, it's not constitutionally legal, but in times of war, the safety of the nation trumps the rights of individuals. And the significance. Korematsu versus the United States continued the idea that started in Schenck versus the United States. And that's something that we talked about during a previous lesson. Individual rights can be temporarily eliminated during wartime. So that about wraps it up. In closing, we've talked about women in the factories, purpose of victory gardens, the OPA, OES, and WLB, purpose of rationing and war bonds, and Japanese internment. So with that, I hope you've been able to create your own notes. If you have to watch this multiple times, go ahead and do that. If there are questions, please come see me. We'll be seeing notes like this in the future. So again, you're creating your own notes. It can be a concept map, outline, or just copy the information as is. But you need to make sure that you have in this information. Okay, and we'll look at it when we get back to class, and we'll talk about maybe how we can improve this. Okay? So, have a great night, and when we come back, we will be looking at winning the war. We're in it, now we've got to win it. See you next time.